The Galactic Council chamber stretched across 3 kilometers of gleaming metal and crystal, suspended in the void between stars. Representatives from 47 species gathered here every cycle to discuss matters of peace, trade, and civilization. The chamber had stood for 8,000 years, a testament to cooperation and unity among the stars. Ambassador Day Wan sat in the human delegation section, listening to the Velocian trade minister drone on about tariff adjustments. The Velocians were insectoid creatures, their chitinous bodies covered in ceremonial wraps that shimmered with embedded lights. They had controlled the major trade routes for millennia and never let anyone forget it. Day Wan had served as humanity's chief representative for 20 years now. He had gray hair at his temples and lines around his eyes from too many late-night negotiation sessions. He wore the simple blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps, deliberately understated compared to the elaborate costumes of the elder species. Humanity had joined the Council 200 years ago. It felt like yesterday to some of the older species, who measured their lives in centuries or millennia. The Brinthian collective beings of pure energy who inhabited crystalline bodies for these meetings had members who remembered when humanity still lived on a single planet. At first, the Council had been skeptical. Humans were young, aggressive, and disturbingly creative. But humanity had proven useful, very useful. Bora, one of humanity's leading scientists, had revolutionized faster-than-light travel 15 years ago. Her modifications to the standard jump drives increased efficiency by 40% and reduced power consumption by half. Every ship in Council space now used her designs. The old jump drives, which had been considered perfect for 3,000 years, were suddenly obsolete. Tai Yang and his engineering teams had built the new trade stations, the medical facilities, on frontier worlds, and the communications relay network that connected the outer colonies to the core worlds. His people worked tirelessly, often in dangerous conditions, to maintain the infrastructure that kept civilization running. Jiwan, a former soldier turned mediator, had resolved the centuries-old dispute between the Karathi and the Talminari. The two species had been locked in a Cold War that threatened to turn hot every few decades. Jiwan spent 3 years living among both peoples, learning their languages and cultures, finding common ground where others saw only division. The peace treaty she negotiated had held for a decade now. These were just the famous examples. Thousands of humans worked throughout Council space, contributing their skills and knowledge freely. They asked for little in return, content to be part of something larger than themselves. But lately, Day Wan had noticed something troubling. The Council praised human achievements certainly, but the official histories minimized them. When the new FTL drives were discussed, the records mentioned collaborative development by Council scientists, without naming Bora or her team. When the infrastructure projects were celebrated, Tai Yang's name appeared in footnotes, if at all. It went beyond mere credit. When human colonies requested assistance, the Council was slow to respond. When human representatives proposed new initiatives, they faced endless committees and delays. Hyun Woo, who administered a human colony on the frontier, had requested aid 3 months ago. His colony was struggling with crop failures and needed agricultural technology. The request sat in committee, bouncing from department to department. Meanwhile, when a Velocian colony had faced similar problems the previous year, aid arrived within a week. Day Wan had raised the issue quietly, through proper channels. He was told that the Velocian colony was strategically important. He was told that resources were limited. He was told to be patient. He was always being told to be patient. Today's session was another example. Day One had submitted a proposal 3 months ago for mutual defense pacts with several independent worlds in the Outer Rim. These worlds were not part of the Council, but maintained friendly relations. They were also vulnerable to pirate attacks and raids by hostile powers. The proposal was simple: extend Council protection to these worlds in exchange for trade agreements and cooperation. It would expand the Council's influence peacefully and protect innocent populations. The Velocian trade minister had just finished explaining why this was impossible. The independent worlds were too primitive, too unstable, too unpredictable. They would be a drain on resources. They might draw the Council into conflicts that did not concern them. The Brynthian overseer spoke next, its crystalline body pulsing with light. Its voice resonated through the chamber without sound, translated directly into the minds of those present. The overseer agreed with the Velocians. The council must be cautious about expanding responsibilities. There were already so many obligations to existing members. The Karathi war leader stood, its reptilian scales gleaming red and gold. The Karathi were proud warriors, honorable in their own way. The war leader spoke of military considerations. These independent worlds had no defensive capabilities worth mentioning. They would require constant protection. The Karathi fleets were already stretched thin maintaining current borders. Day One listened to each argument. He had heard them all before during the preparation meetings. He had provided counter-arguments, data, strategic analysis. None of it mattered. The vote was called. 38 species voted against the proposal. 7 abstained. Only 2 voted in favor, humanity and the small Relan species, who rarely participated in major decisions. The council speaker, a Velocian, elder who had held the position for 600 years, thanked Day One for his contribution. The speaker said that humanity's enthusiasm was admirable, but that wisdom came with age. Perhaps in another few centuries, humanity would understand the complexities of galactic governance. Day One stood and bowed respectfully. He said nothing. There was nothing to say that would make any difference. He returned to his seat and began gathering his papers. Around him, the council moved on to the next item on the agenda, a discussion about standardizing decorative architecture in public spaces. It would probably take 3 hours. Day One looked at the humans in the delegation. His assistant, a young woman named Minji, looked angry. She kept her face neutral, but Day One could see the tension in her shoulders. The other staff members showed similar frustration. He caught their attention and made a small gesture. Stay calm. Stay professional. The session dragged on. The Velocians wanted buildings that reflected traditional design principles. The Brynthians wanted structures that accommodated energy-based life forms. The Karathi wanted fortified architecture that could double as defensive positions. No one asked what humans wanted. As the session finally ended, Day One walked out of the chamber. He did not speak to the other ambassadors who clustered in groups, continuing their discussions. He went directly to his office in the human section of the station. Once inside, he sat at his desk and stared at the stars beyond the viewport. He thought about Hyunwoo's colony, still waiting for aid. He thought about Bo-Ra, whose name would be forgotten in a generation. He thought about Tae-Yang, building infrastructure that others would claim credit for. He thought about Ji-Wan, risking her life to bring peace that the council considered inevitable. He thought about what respect actually meant. Day One opened a secure communication channel. He began drafting a message to Earth. His fingers moved slowly across the console, choosing each word carefully. The message was not angry. It was not accusatory. It was simply honest. After 2 hours, he finished. He read it through one final time, then saved it as a draft. He would sleep on it. In the morning, he would decide whether to send it, but deep down, he already knew what he would do. Outside his window, the stars shone cold and distant, beautiful and indifferent. The emergency session was called at midnight station time. Day One arrived within minutes, still fastening his uniform jacket. The council chamber was half empty. Many representatives sent junior staff instead of coming themselves. The holographic display at the center of the chamber showed a planet burning. New Jeju was a human colony world, home to 80,000 people. It was a farming community, peaceful and productive. The colonists grew food that fed 3 nearby systems. They had schools, hospitals, parks where children played. They had lives. The Malvorn Dominion had attacked 6 hours ago. Their warships appeared without warning and opened fire. The orbital defenses, never meant for serious military action, were destroyed in minutes. Then the bombardment began. Day One watched the footage. Cities burning. Agricultural centers destroyed. The main hospital was a crater. The death toll was still being counted, but early estimates suggested 20,000 dead. 20,000 people who had been eating breakfast or going to work or putting their children to bed. The Malvorn Dominion was an expansionist power from beyond council space. They were not particularly powerful, but they were aggressive and opportunistic. They had been making threatening moves for years. Humanity had warned the council repeatedly. Every warning had been dismissed as overreaction. Daewon presented his case. The attack on New Jeju was unprovoked and illegal under every standard of interstellar law. The Malvorn had deliberately targeted civilians. This was not a border skirmish or a misunderstanding. This was an act of war. He formally requested council military intervention under the mutual defense agreements that all member species had signed. The council speaker called for discussion. The Velocian trade minister spoke first. This was a tragic situation, certainly, but military action was serious. The council needed to consider all angles. What if the Malvorn had legitimate grievances? What if human colonists had somehow provoked this response? Rushing to judgment would be unwise. Daewon felt something cold settle in his chest. He played the footage again. He pointed out the targeting data. The Malvorn had deliberately hit civilian targets. They had avoided the few military installations. This was not a defensive action. This was terrorism. The Brinthian overseer pulsed with concern. More data was needed. A full investigation should be conducted. Perhaps mediators should be sent to speak with the Malvorn leadership. Violence should always be the last resort. The Karathi war leader agreed that the attack was troubling. However, the Karathi fleets were positioned to defend Council core worlds. Redeploying to the frontier would leave critical areas vulnerable. Perhaps the humans could handle this themselves. The discussion continued for hours. Every suggestion Daewon made met with objections, conditions, delays. Finally, as dawn approached, the council agreed to send humanitarian aid and medical supplies. Military action was referred to committee for further study. Daewon stood silent as the vote was recorded. Around him, the council representatives began to file out, returning to their quarters. Several nodded sympathetically as they passed. None offered concrete help. He returned to the human section and sent updated orders to the human fleet. They would defend New Jeju alone. 3 weeks later, Commander Young Sik arrived at the council station. He came aboard without ceremony, his uniform still showing scorch marks from combat. He carried a datapad containing casualty reports and tactical analyses. Young Sik was a career military officer, a veteran of a dozen conflicts. He was not a diplomat. He did not smile or bow or observe elaborate courtesies. He asked for an immediate audience with the council and was granted one. Daewon accompanied him to the chamber. Young Sik stood at the speaker's podium and presented his report. His voice was flat, emotionless, professional. Human forces had driven the Malvorn away from New Jeju. The battle had lasted 4 days. 3 human ships were destroyed. 700 military personnel were dead. The colony was saved, but barely. 35,000 civilians were dead or missing. Young Sik showed footage of the battle. Human ships outnumbered and outgunned, fighting desperately to protect their home. He showed the wreckage of the Malvorn fleet floating in space. He showed the mass graves on New Jeju, where thousands were being buried. Then he stopped and looked directly at the council speaker. "We defended ourselves as required by law," Young Sik said. "We request the council honor mutual defense agreements and provide military support. The Malvorn will attack again. They always do. We need help." The council speaker thanked Young Sik for his service. The matter would be reviewed by the appropriate committees. Decisions of this magnitude required careful consideration. Young Sik stared at the speaker for a long moment. Then he nodded once and left the chamber. As the weeks passed, human citizens across council space began to notice patterns. A human teacher named Haewon compiled education statistics showing that human schools received a fraction of the funding given to equivalent institutions run by elder species. A human doctor named Kyung-soo documented how human medical innovations were being patented by council research institutes without credit or compensation. Mi-sun, a logistics coordinator at one of the major trade stations, started keeping detailed records. She tracked every shipment, every resource allocation, every supply request. She created spreadsheets showing how human efficiency kept the entire trade network functioning. She showed how human workers took the difficult shifts, the dangerous assignments, the jobs no one else wanted. Xiang Ho, a data analyst, went deeper. He accessed historical records going back 2 centuries. He compiled a comprehensive report showing human contributions to the Council, agricultural technology that prevented famines, medical breakthroughs that saved billions of lives, engineering solutions that made space travel safer and cheaper, diplomatic interventions that stopped wars. The numbers were staggering. By any objective measure, humanity had given far more than it received. Xiang-Ho sent his report to Day-Wan, who read it over 3 nights. Each page made him angrier and sadder in equal measure. He called for one final formal presentation to the Council. This was not a common practice, but his request was granted. After all, it cost the Council nothing to listen. Day-Wan stood before the assembled representatives with Xiang-Ho's report displayed behind him. He spoke for 2 hours, walking through the data point by point. He was not angry. He did not accuse. He simply showed the truth. Humanity had saved the Velocian economy twice in the past century. Humanity had prevented the extinction of the Rylan species through medical intervention. Humanity had built 80% of the infrastructure the Council relied upon. Humanity had mediated 34 major conflicts and countless minor disputes. In return, humanity received delays, dismissals, and condescension. Day-Wan finished his presentation and made one simple request. Treat humanity as true equals. Give human representatives actual voting power in proportion to their contributions. Honor the mutual defense agreements without hesitation or committee review. Acknowledge human achievements openly and honestly. The Council speaker responded with a speech about how much the Council valued humanity's contributions. Humanity was a cherished member of the galactic community, but the current system had worked for millennia. Change required careful consideration. Perhaps in time, adjustments could be made. Several other representatives spoke. They praised human enthusiasm and energy. They suggested that humanity was still young and needed to learn patience. One Velocian elder gave a lengthy lecture about the wisdom that comes with age and experience. No one addressed Day-Wan's actual request. The session ended. The Council moved on to other business. Day-Wan stood at the podium for a moment longer, looking at the representatives who were already focused on their data pads and private conversations. He felt something shift inside him, a weight he had been carrying finally settling into place. He gathered his materials and walked out of the chamber. He did not speak to anyone. He went directly to the communications center in the human section. The message he sent was short. Just 2 words and a code phrase: protocol departure. Commence. The message went to Earth first, then cascaded through the human networks to every colony, every ship, every human citizen working in Council space. It was encrypted using a system only humans knew, designed for exactly this contingency. Within an hour, confirmations began arriving. The response was unanimous. Day-Wan sat alone in his office, watching the confirmations scroll across his screen. He felt no satisfaction, no triumph, only sadness and relief. Outside his window, the Council station continued its endless orbit. The lights of 1,000 ships came and went. Business as usual, but everything had changed. Quietly and visibly, humanity had made a choice. The Council did not know it yet, but their golden age was ending, and the humans were going home. Bora began packing her laboratory on a Tuesday morning. Her research facility orbited a Velocian core world, a gleaming station dedicated to advanced physics. She had worked here for 12 years, pursuing the fundamental questions of faster-than-light travel. Her team of 15 human scientists moved efficiently through the lab. They cataloged equipment, backed up personal research notes, and carefully erased proprietary algorithms from the main computers. The facility's AI would still function, but the intuitive leaps, the creative insights that made Bora's work revolutionary, those went with her. A Velocian administrator arrived as they were loading the last containers. His antennae twitched with confusion. "Dr. Bora, what is happening?" "Your contract has 3 more years," Bora smiled politely. "I'm returning to human space. My resignation was filed last week through proper channels. But your research, the new jump drive prototype. The prototype is complete and documented. Your people can continue from here." The administrator's mandibles clicked nervously. "The documentation is incomplete. There are gaps in the theoretical framework. The documentation contains everything required by my contract," Bora said gently. If it seems incomplete, perhaps that indicates how much was never written down, how much existed only in our heads. She boarded the shuttle with her team. The administrator stood on the dock, watching them leave, slowly realizing what those gaps in documentation actually meant. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out. Tai Yang and his engineering crews finished their current maintenance schedules, then quietly submitted resignations. They left instruction manuals for the infrastructure they had built, but the manuals were technical documents, dry and precise. They explained what to do, but not why. They described procedures, but not the understanding that made those procedures work. A Brinthian station manager contacted Tai Yang as his team prepared to depart. The manager wanted to discuss transition plans. Who would maintain the critical systems? Who understood the custom modifications that kept everything running smoothly? Any competent engineer can follow the manuals, Tai Yang said. But you redesigned half these systems. The modifications aren't standard. That's true. We made things more efficient. The old standard designs will still work if you reinstall them. They're just slower and more expensive to operate. The manager's crystalline body pulsed with distress. Reinstalling would take years. It would shut down trade routes. Tai Yang nodded sympathetically. That does sound difficult. I hope you find a solution. He left on the next transport. Human merchants began closing their offices. They completed existing contracts but accepted no new business. They had always been reliable partners, so their trading partners assumed this was temporary. A short break. Humans took vacations sometimes, didn't they? But weeks passed and the offices stayed closed. The human trade ships stopped arriving at their regular schedules. The goods that humans provided, specialized medicines and foods and technical components, became scarce. Prices began rising. Human doctors worked through their patient lists. They treated everyone who came to them, gave follow-up care, ensured current treatments were complete. Then they packed their medical equipment and went home. They left behind standard council medical technology, which worked perfectly well for most conditions. But the specialized treatments, the creative solutions to unusual problems, those required human intuition and human training. A Karathi hospital administrator begged Dr. Wanshik to stay. The hospital served a population of 10 million. Wanshik was the only doctor who knew how to treat Theron syndrome, a rare genetic disorder that affected a few hundred patients. I've trained 2 of your staff, Wanshik said. They know the basic protocols. Basic protocols have a 60% success rate. Your treatment has 98%. Wanshik was quiet for a moment. Then I hope your people learn quickly. The information is all in the medical database. You know databases can't capture clinical judgment. That comes from experience. Yes, Wanshik said softly. It does. He left the next day. The administrator watched his shuttle depart and wondered how many patients would die before someone else developed that experience. Human teachers completed their current semesters. They gave final exams, submitted grades, and said goodbye to their students. Many students protested, especially the young ones who had grown attached to their teachers. The humans hugged them, told them to study hard, and left. The educational systems continued without them. But something was missing. Human teachers had a gift for making difficult concepts clear. They found creative ways to reach struggling students. They brought enthusiasm and innovation to classrooms that had been teaching the same material the same way for centuries. Test scores began dropping within a month. Ji Wan, the mediator, was in the middle of a difficult negotiation between 2 council species when she received the departure message. She carefully guided both parties to a temporary agreement, enough to maintain peace while they found someone else to continue the work. Then she excused herself and returned to her ship. Both parties tried to convince her to stay. The dispute was complicated, involving historical grievances and cultural misunderstandings. It would take someone with her skills years to resolve. I recommend you contact the Council Mediation Office, Jiwon said. They have trained professionals. We've tried them. They don't understand our perspectives. You do, Jiwon considered this. That's because I lived among your people for 3 years. I learned your languages, your histories, your values. That's not something that can be rushed. So you'll abandon us? I never promised to solve your problems forever. I offered help and you accepted. Now I'm needed elsewhere. She left, and within a month the dispute reignited. Without her steady presence, old angers resurfaced. The council noticed the departures, of course. At first it seemed like a minor issue. Humans were emotional creatures. They would calm down and return. The Velocian High Speaker issued a statement expressing understanding for humanity's feelings. The statement emphasized that the council door was always open. When humans were ready to discuss their concerns properly, they would be welcomed back. Human ambassadors across council space acknowledged the statement politely and continued packing. The weeks became months. Every human was leaving. Not in panic, not in anger, but with calm determination. They fulfilled their contracts, completed their obligations, said polite goodbyes, and departed. The council began to worry. Emergency sessions were called. Representatives discussed the situation in worried tones. This was unprecedented. Species didn't just leave the council. It wasn't done. A Brinthian delegation traveled to the nearest human colony seeking to understand. They found a thriving world, busy and productive. The humans were polite but distant. "Why are you leaving?" the Brinthian overseer asked Day One, who had retired to this colony. "We're not leaving," Day One said. "We're already gone." Semantics. "Why?" Day One poured tea for his guests. "Tell me, overseer. What's the difference between a partnership and a convenience?" The overseer's crystalline body pulsed thoughtfully. Partnership implies equality, mutual benefit, shared respect, and convenience, using something because it's available and helpful, discarding it when it's not needed. Day One sipped his tea. "We understand the difference now," the overseer tried to argue. The council valued humanity. This was all a misunderstanding. Surely compromises could be reached. Day One listened politely and said nothing of substance. The delegation left empty-handed. The last humans departed council space 6 months after protocol departure was initiated. There were no dramatic final speeches, no angry declarations. They simply left. The council suddenly found itself managing a civilization built partly on foundations that humans had created. Those foundations were documented, certainly, but documentation wasn't understanding. It wasn't intuition. It wasn't the creative problem-solving that humans had brought to every challenge. A critical trade route collapsed when the human-designed navigational relay system failed. The backup systems worked, but they required twice as much power and provided half the accuracy. Ships got lost. Shipments were delayed. The Velocian trade empire, already struggling with rising costs, began hemorrhaging profits. On a Karathi military world, a chemical plant exploded. The plant produced specialized fuel for military ships. It had been designed by human engineers using innovative safety systems. When the safety systems failed, no one knew how to repair them. The plant's destruction crippled the local fleet. The council scrambled to hire new specialists, to train replacements, to fill the gaps. But expertise takes time to develop. Knowledge requires years of study and practice. The humans were gone and they had taken their expertise with them. In human space, life continued. They established new trade routes with independent worlds. They built their own infrastructure. They focused on their own development and the development of their new partners. They did not celebrate the council's struggles. They simply stopped caring about them. Yunji, an infrastructure specialist, received a desperate message from a Brinthian administrator. The main communications hub for an entire sector was failing. Could she please help? Yunji read the message carefully. Then she composed a brief reply. I'm sorry for your difficulties. I recommend consulting the technical documentation. I wish you success in resolving this issue. She did not respond to the follow-up messages begging for assistance. She had work to do, building systems for people who valued her contribution. The first year without humans was difficult. The second year was catastrophic. The faster-than-light network that connected the galaxy began failing in cascading waves. Bora's modifications had made the old jump drives 40% more efficient. Now, with only the original technology available, ships limped between stars at speeds that seemed impossibly slow. A journey that once took 3 days now took a week. A route that was once profitable became economically worthless. Remote colonies that relied on regular supply shipments found themselves isolated, their supplies dwindling. The Velocian trade minister stood before the council, his antennae drooping with exhaustion. His species had controlled galactic trade for millennia. Now their empire was collapsing. We cannot maintain current trade volumes, he reported. Travel times have tripled. Fuel costs have doubled. Profit margins have vanished. 17 major trading houses have declared bankruptcy. 32 more will fail within the month. The council chamber was quiet. Everyone understood what this meant. The Velocian trade network was the foundation of the galactic economy. If it failed completely, civilization itself might fragment. What about human jump drive designs? Someone asked. The trade minister clicked his mandibles in frustration. We have the designs. We can manufacture the modified drives. But they fail after a few months. We're missing something. Some understanding that isn't in the documentation. Contact the humans. Hire them as consultants. We've tried. They're not interested. Medical crises erupted across council space. Human doctors had developed treatments for hundreds of conditions. Many of these treatments were documented, but documentation wasn't enough. Medicine required intuition, experience, the ability to adapt to unexpected complications. A plague broke out on a Brinthian colony world. It was a mutation of a common virus, the kind of thing that happened occasionally. Human doctors had handled similar outbreaks dozens of times. They would have contained it within weeks. The council medical response team studied the documentation. They followed the protocols exactly. The plague spread anyway, killing thousands. Something in the protocols wasn't working, but no one understood why. Dr. Wan Shik, now living in human space, heard about the outbreak. He reviewed the public data and immediately saw the problem. The protocols assumed certain conditions that didn't exist on that particular colony. A human doctor on site would have noticed and adjusted. But there were no human doctors on site anymore. Wan Shik considered sending advice. Then he remembered the hospital administrator who had watched him leave, who had known patients would die, but had never fought to change the system that made humans feel unwelcome. Wan Shik closed the data file and returned to his work treating patients who lived in societies that valued him. The food distribution network collapsed. Human agronomists had designed systems to grow food efficiently on dozens of different world types. They had created crop varieties that thrived in extreme conditions. They had built distribution systems that prevented famine even during bad harvests. Without human oversight, the systems began failing. Crops withered. Distribution became inefficient. Food prices soared. On a Karathi colony world, children went hungry for the first time in 200 years. The local governor stared at reports showing food supplies running critically low. She remembered the human agronomist who had set up their farming systems, a cheerful woman named Ye Jin, who had spent 5 years making sure everything worked perfectly. The governor had barely spoken to Ye Jin during those 5 years. Why would she? The human was staff, not worth a leader's attention. Now the governor would give anything to have Ye Jin back. But Ye Jin was gone, working on a human colony world, teaching farmers who thanked her for her help. The Malvorn Dominion watched the council's struggles with predatory interest. They had been bloodied at New Jeju, but they were patient. They waited until the council showed weakness, then struck. Their fleets hit 3 colony worlds simultaneously. The attacks were coordinated and devastating. The Karathi military, once the finest fighting force in the galaxy, responded slowly and ineffectively. Commander Young Sik had trained many Karathi officers in human tactical doctrines. He had taught them to think flexibly, to adapt to changing situations, to use information warfare alongside conventional weapons. The Karathi had learned the techniques but not the philosophy behind them. They fought bravely but predictably. The Malvorn commanders, who had studied human tactics extensively, exploited every rigid response. All 3 colony worlds fell within a week. The Karathi war leader called an emergency session. His scales had lost their luster. He looked old and tired. "We need the humans," he said simply. "Our military is failing. We need their strategic analysis. We need their tactical flexibility. We need their support systems." The council speaker shifted uncomfortably. "The humans have made their position clear. They're not interested in helping. Then make them interested. Offer them whatever they want. They don't want what we have to offer. They want respect, equality, genuine partnership, things we haven't given them." The war leader's tail lashed in frustration. "Then give them those things. It's not that simple. Our entire system is built on the elder species leading. If we make humans equal, what about the other young species? Where does it end?" "It ends with us surviving," the war leader said. "Without help, we'll lose this war." Commander Kyle, A Karathi fleet officer and decorated war hero, took matters into his own hands. He traveled secretly to human space without official authorization. He found Young Sik on a military station, training human recruits. Kale and Young Sik had served together years ago, during a joint peacekeeping mission. They had respected each other then. "I need your help," Kyle said without preamble. "My people are dying. The Malvorn are winning. We can't stop them alone." Young Sik studied his old comrade. Kale looked exhausted, desperate. Good people were dying because of decisions made by leaders who refused to learn. "I'm sorry to hear that," Young Sik said carefully. "Will you help us?" "Not officially, not through the council. Just you, your tactical expertise." "Why should I?" Kale's scales flushed darker. "Because people are dying. Civilians, children. The Malvorn don't care about military targets. They're massacring populations, like they did at New Jeju." Kale flinched. "I argued for intervention. I was overruled. And now you want us to fix the problem you wouldn't help us with. It's not about me. It's about innocent lives." Young Sik was quiet for a long moment. "Kyle, you're a good warrior and an honorable person. But you need to understand something. We offered partnership. The council wanted servants. We offered friendship. The council wanted convenience. We gave everything we had, and it was never enough because the council never saw us as equals. Things can change. They should have changed before. Before New Jeju. Before humans bled defending themselves alone. You had decades to treat us with respect. You chose not to. So you'll let innocent people die to make a point?" Young Sik's expression hardened. "We're not letting anyone die. The council is. We didn't start this war. We didn't refuse mutual defense obligations. We didn't dismiss warnings about the Malvorn threat. The council did all of that. What about basic morality? Helping those in need? We help those who help us. We help those who treat us as equals. The council had 2 centuries to learn that lesson. You're not our responsibility anymore." Kale stood, his shoulders slumped. "We're not all the same. Some of us fought for better treatment of humans. I believe you. But you lost those fights, and now you're living with the consequences." Kyle left the station. Young Sik watched his ship depart and felt no satisfaction, only sadness. Good people were dying. But good people had always been dying while the council debated and delayed. Back in council space, the situation worsened. The Malvorn advanced steadily. Refugee fleets fled deeper into council territory. Food shortages became famines. Medical systems collapsed. The infrastructure that had connected civilization began falling apart. Member species started blaming each other. The Velosians accused the Brinthians of hoarding resources. The Karathi accused the Velosians of cowardice. Old rivalries, suppressed for millennia by prosperity and stability, erupted into the open. The council chambers, once dignified and orderly, became forums for bitter arguments. Representatives shouted at each other. Some walked out in protest. The unity that had been the council's greatest strength was crumbling. The Velosian high speaker called for order, but his voice had lost its authority. Everyone knew the truth now. The Golden Age was over. The council had been built on a foundation they didn't understand, maintained by people they had taken for granted, and those people were gone. A junior Velosian diplomat named Thex finally spoke what everyone was thinking. "We built our entire civilization on human contributions. We used their innovations, relied on their work, benefited from their expertise, and we never thanked them properly. We never valued them. We treated them like tools." The chamber was silent. "Now they're gone," Thex continued, "and we finally understand what they were worth. But it's too late." The high speaker started to respond, then stopped. What could he say? Thex was right. The council finally voted to send an official delegation to human space. Not to demand, not to lecture. To beg. 5 years had passed since protocol departure. The galaxy had changed beyond recognition. The Galactic Council still existed, technically. Representatives still met in the Great Chamber. But the meetings were smaller now, quieter. Many species had withdrawn to their home systems, focusing on survival rather than grand galactic unity. The dream of unified civilization had fractured into desperate, struggling fragments. The Malvorn Dominion controlled a third of former council space. Their advance had slowed, not because the council had grown stronger, but because the Malvorn were consolidating their gains. They would push forward again soon. Everyone knew it. On the human colony world of New Busan, Daewon tended his garden. He was 72 now, officially retired. His hair was completely gray and his hands showed the weathering of age. But his eyes were still sharp, still thoughtful. He grew tomatoes mostly and peppers. His small house overlooked a valley where a river ran between forested hills. It was peaceful here. He could hear birds singing and children playing in the distance. Minji, his former assistant, visited him weekly. She was a senior diplomat now, handling relations with the Independent Worlds Alliance. She brought him tea and news from across human space. The council delegation arrives tomorrow, she said, pouring tea into ceramic cups. In-ho asked if you wanted to attend. Daewon considered. No, I'm retired. In-ho can handle it. They specifically asked to meet with you. I'm sure they did, but I have nothing to say to them that matters anymore. Minji smiled slightly. You're not curious about what they'll offer? They'll offer what they always should have offered. Equality, partnership, respect. They'll apologize for past treatment. They'll promise things will be different. Daewon sipped his tea. And they'll mean it too. Desperation makes everyone sincere. Will we help them? That depends on what they're actually asking for. Each member of the alliance brought something valuable. Each was treated as an equal partner. The result was a civilization that, while smaller than the council at its peak, was vibrant and growing. Ji-won served as chief mediator for the alliance. She worked from a station orbiting New Seoul, handling disputes and facilitating cooperation. The work was similar to what she had done for the council, but the atmosphere was completely different. When I worked for the council, she told a group of young diplomats, I spent half my energy fighting bureaucracy and the other half dealing with species who didn't really want solutions. They wanted to be proven right. Here, people actually want to solve problems. It's remarkable how much easier that makes everything. The council delegation arrived at New Seoul on a cold autumn morning. They came in a single diplomatic ship, not the grand fleet that would have accompanied such a mission in the old days. The delegation consisted of 5 members, 1 from each of the major council species. In-ho greeted them at the station with courtesy, but without warmth. He was 50 years old, a career diplomat who had spent his youth watching his mentors be dismissed and disrespected. He had no nostalgia for the council. The delegation was led by the Velocian High Speaker himself, which showed how desperate things had become. Leaders of his rank rarely left the core worlds. Beside him stood a Brynthian overseer, a Karathi war leader, and representatives from 2 other species. They looked tired. The High Speaker's antennae drooped. The Karathi's scales were dull. The Brynthian's crystalline body had cracks that suggested damage and poor maintenance. In-ho led them to a meeting room with wide windows overlooking the planet below. He offered refreshments, which they accepted gratefully. Then he waited for them to speak. The High Speaker began. His voice was humble, a stark contrast to the lectures he had once delivered about patience and wisdom. We come to request aid, he said simply. The council is failing. Without help, our civilization will collapse. Billions will die. We're asking humanity to return. In-ho listened without expression. Return to what exactly? To the council. To your positions helping maintain galactic civilization. Under what terms? The High Speaker produced a data pad. We've prepared a new charter. Humans would have full voting rights equal to any elder species. Human representatives would serve on all major committees. Human colonies would receive the same support and protection as core worlds. In-ho reviewed the document. It was generous, genuinely so. Everything Daewon had asked for 5 years ago and more. He set the pad down. This is a good offer, In-ho said. 5 years ago, we would have accepted immediately. The High Speaker's antennae twitched hopefully. Then you'll help? I said it was a good offer 5 years ago. Now? It's irrelevant. The Karathi war leader leaned forward. How can equality be irrelevant? Because we're not interested in joining the council anymore. Not on any terms. The Brynthian overseer pulsed with distress. But you must. Without human expertise, the council will fall. The Malvorn will destroy everything we've built over millennia. You're asking us to save a civilization that never valued us, In-ho said. A civilization that treated us as convenient tools. Why would we do that? Because you're better than we were, the High Speaker said quietly. Because you understand mercy and compassion in ways we failed to. In-ho was silent for a long moment. We do understand those things, which is why we'll help, but not in the way you want. He pulled up a star map showing the galaxy. The Council territory was shaded red, shrinking as Malvorn forces advanced. Human and Alliance territory was shaded blue, stable and growing. "We won't rejoin the Council," Inho said. "That civilization is dead. You killed it through arrogance and complacency. We won't resurrect it." "Then you'll let it die?" the Karathi asked. "No. We'll let you choose what comes next. Here are your options." Inho highlighted 3 paths on the map. Option 1, we provide humanitarian aid. We'll accept refugees. We'll send medical supplies and food to civilian populations. We'll help innocent people who are suffering. But we won't save the Council as an institution. We won't fight your war. We won't rebuild your civilization. The delegation members exchanged glances. There wasn't enough. They needed more. Option 2, Inho continued. Individual species can apply to join the Independent Worlds Alliance. Not as the Council joining collectively, but as separate peoples requesting membership. You would be evaluated like any applicant. If accepted, you would have the same rights and responsibilities as every other member. You would be equals, not leaders. The High Speaker's antennae trembled. Join the Alliance? As equals to species they had once considered primitive. The thought was almost incomprehensible. Option 3, Inho finished. You continue alone. We wish you well and close our borders. You face the Malvorn with whatever resources you have left. We focus on protecting our own people and our allies. The Karathi stood abruptly. You would abandon billions to die? Inho met his gaze calmly. You abandoned us at New Jeju. 35,000 humans died while you debated in committees. Don't lecture us about abandonment. The Karathi sat down slowly, the truth of that statement hitting hard. We're not abandoning anyone, Inho continued more gently. We're offering choices, real choices. But we won't sacrifice our people to save a system that never respected them. We won't rebuild the Council's empire for you. That time is over, the Brynthian overseer spoke. If individual species join the Alliance, what happens to the Council? It dissolves. The age of elder species leading younger ones ends. The age of genuine partnership begins. The High Speaker looked at the star map. The blue territory was smaller than the red, but it was growing while the red was shrinking. The contrast was stark. You've built something better than we had, he said softly. You've created what the Council only pretended to be. Yes, Inho agreed. Because we learned from your mistakes. We learned that partnership requires mutual respect. That civilization requires genuine equality. That strength comes from valuing every member, not just the powerful ones. The delegation stayed for 3 days. They toured human colonies, saw the Alliance's operations, spoke with member species. They saw societies where young civilizations worked alongside humans as true partners. They saw prosperity built on cooperation rather than hierarchy. On the final day, the High Speaker met privately with Daewon in his garden. The old Volosian sat on a wooden bench looking at the tomato plants. You knew this would happen, the High Speaker said. When you left, you knew the Council would collapse. Daewon handed him a ripe tomato. I knew you couldn't maintain what you didn't understand. I hoped you would learn before it was too late. But hope and expectation are different things. Do you feel vindicated? No, I feel sad. Good people died because of decisions made by leaders who refused to see their own arrogance. There's no victory in that. The High Speaker bit into the tomato. It was sweet and perfectly ripe. What happens now? That's up to you. You can apply to join the Alliance. You'll be evaluated fairly. If you're accepted, you'll be equals with species you once considered beneath you. That might be difficult for your pride. Pride means nothing when your civilization is dying. Daewon smiled slightly. That's the first truly wise thing I've heard a Council leader say in 40 years. Maybe there's hope after all. 6 months later, the first Council species officially applied for Alliance membership. The Relan, who had always been treated as junior members, applied first and were accepted immediately. They had already been working closely with humans for years. The Volosians applied next. Their evaluation took months. They had to prove they understood equality, that they could work with others as partners rather than leaders. Eventually, they were accepted, but it was humbling. The species that had controlled galactic trade for millennia now sat in council chambers with peoples they had once barely acknowledged. Other species followed. Not all at once, but gradually. Each had to choose, cling to the dying council or join the growing alliance. Many chose alliance. Some chose isolation. A few tried to maintain the council's shadow government. The Malvorn advance stalled as refugees flooded into Alliance territory. The Alliance protected civilians but did not invade Malvorn space. They built strong defenses and offered peace talks. The Malvorn, sensing they faced something different than the old council, agreed to negotiations. It would take decades to fully stabilize the galaxy. But a new order was emerging, built on different principles. An order where partnership meant more than power, where respect was mutual, where every voice mattered. Inho stood in the Alliance Council chambers, now much larger than before, watching representatives from 30 species debate a trade agreement. A Velocian merchant discussed terms with a Kashari artist. A Karathi military officer shared tactics with a human commander. A Ryland farmer compared notes with human agronomists. It wasn't perfect. There were still disagreements and conflicts, but there was also genuine respect, genuine equality. Quietly, humans had departed the old order, and in doing so, they had created the space for something better to grow. The galaxy would never be the same, and that Inho thought was exactly as it should be.